Well, alright. I normally show this stuff I get from rummage sales, from that big sale. Not a lot. The really never is on the fall one. It's really the spring one that I get a lot of stuff. But I can't pass up going to the fall one too. But before I get into that, the last video I did, the batteries died on the camera right at the end. So I'll kind of pick up from there. And it happened to make me think I'm wearing pretty much the same clothes in theory, but these really aren't. These, I have multiples of everything that I have. Like I've got at least 3 of these shirts. It's just, I always do that. When I find something I like, I buy a bunch of them. That way I don't have to think about what I'm going to wear. And there's precedent for this. Einstein did the same thing. Now, I'm not comparing myself to Einstein, but I'm saying the idea that he had was, okay, that's one thing I don't have to think about. I know what I'm going to wear in the morning, same thing I wore the day before. Different clothes, same thing though, Okay, got that out of the way. The batteries died, but those batteries that were in this camera have been in there all summer. And I do videos almost every day. You would think they would die after 3 or 4 videos, but they just go on and on. But there are these Energizer Ultimate Lithiums. And that's why I really like these cameras, because they use 4 of them. Just a tremendous, they keep a high voltage, but as lithiums do, like when I started making that last video, it showed full power on the batteries. And that's the way lithiums work. They'll be full power, all of a sudden, boom, they just die. And that's what these did. But like I say, it was months in there. They're a great battery, and they're not fussy about temperature, minus 40 to 140. They just work. Excellent battery. If you have electronic stuff that runs on these, AA batteries, man, these are the ones to use. I wish to God I could get a phone battery that would work as well as these do. I'm fighting with my phone now where the battery's dying on it. It's like 2 years old, and then the problem starts. Okay, when the other video ended, I was starting to talk about this Norland axe. Now, what I was saying, these Norlands and any of these Hudson Bay type axes can be tricky to hang because they really got to fit well, because you've got very little space in here you're monkeying with. They're very short. So they can be tough. It's a bit of a challenge to get them, because like I say, they're hourglass shaped inside, and when you've got a very short space, you got to have a really good fit on them or they're going to work loose. Now, to the stuff. As long as I'm in the axe vein, I'll mention I did pick up an axe head. $2. Though I cannot distinguish any markings on it, it is an older one. Now, here's a problem you run into on some of these where people have pounded the head on and off. It develops a ridge in here. Now I'm going to have to file that out of there before I even try putting a handle on it. But, this was, I think it was $2. I didn't really need one, but it gave me an idea. So I'm going to clean this one up, get rid of that lip in there, because that does make them hard to fit. This side ain't bad, but it's here where somebody's been pounding it on. You would think people would know not to do that, but they still do. Or sometimes you see it back here where they pounded them off. But there's, you use the weight of the axe to do it. You don't need to be pounding on them. But I got to take this burr off of here too, because this is to the point where, it's a little bit dangerous. You get a sharp burr there, so I'll get rid of that. But my thought in buying this, then I went and searched out a handle. And this is a Bowman handle. And this is not one that I would buy for myself, because when I talk about, you know, heartwood and sapwood, I don't like to mix the two. And this is, you know, a straight handle, and the grain is, it's this way. It's the opposite direction of what most people would want. So this hasn't got a lot going for it. But I've always had a theory that if these break, or when they break, they'll break right at that boundary between the heartwood and the sapwood. So I'm going to put this handle on, this head, and bring it down to the hunting shack and leave it there. And leave about a dozen pieces of oak, about, say, that big around with a lot of knots in them. And let those guys pound away at it. And see, and it will break, you know, because those people are what fiberglass handled axes are made for. And I'm sure they'll beat up the bottom here, but I want to see when it breaks, if it breaks right along that boundary between the heartwood and the sapwood. That's always been my concern, so I always avoided these. But we'll see what happens. So that's an experiment in progress. I'm pretty sure they'll break it this year. If they don't, they'll break it next year. So I'll give you an update whenever I find it in two pieces. If they don't throw it underneath the shack or something and it disappears. Okay, Stanley Thermos. Now I've got one of these that I needed a replacement cup for. Problem is, the cup is like 10 bucks or something, you know, just for the cup. Well, I bought the whole thermos for half of that. Now, the reason I wanted one of these fit in a Stanley lunch box. They made a special box that this clips into under the handle. Now, I have one of them, but I never used it in the road grader because a common complaint with the Volvo equipment like that is there isn't really room in there for anything of any size. You know, like a cooler. Nothing would fit in there. In fact, Volvo later came out with their own special Volvo lunchbox that fit in the space that was allotted in there, but I wasn't going to buy a special lunchbox, so I just use a backpack all the time. But the other day, and this is going to come up more often, there's a neighbor here like a mile away who does custom silage chopping. Well, he runs short of truck drivers. Sometimes the driver doesn't show up, or, you know, he needs a driver in a hurry. Well, I'm only a mile away, so he can call me up and I come over. It's a frantic, hectic sort of thing, but it's all right. It's a change, and you make a little money at it, so I don't mind doing it. He's a nice guy, so. Now, in my canning, I never use spoons, you know, measuring spoons, but in canning you really should, you know, like a lot of times it calls for a tablespoon of salt. Well, or a teaspoon, I should say. I can get, you know, I tend to, if I'm in doubt, you know, I pour it in my hand, dump it in. But I tend to maybe over salt stuff. I don't underdo it, that's for sure. But I figured, okay, just for that, to get this 25 cents, you know, I can live with that. If I lose them, you know, they're just plastic. But for a quarter, okay, it'll take that question out of it. One of the 12-volt trouble lights, something I don't need a lot, but it's all right to have. And I don't remember what I paid for it. They're not much, you know, these things turn up all the time. But it's all right to have. Here, $1 for a Coleman air pump. Now, people maybe aren't familiar with that, but before Coleman started building air pumps into their little gas appliances, they just had a little ball check valve on the cap, and you would put this on there and then pump her up. Well, the leather's dried out on this one, But they had, you know, irons and stoves and the lanterns. They all used that system before they put the pump into the unit. Well, you run across those units, but you don't often run across these, though I do now have 3 of them. But someday I have the old light, it's a desk lamp. It isn't Coleman, it's a different brand, but it's the one that my grandparents had. That's a gas, you know, and it's got the shade and everything for it. My uncle brought that up like last year, and I've never got around to setting it up because you know, it uses the mantles. And it's got the shade, which are hard to replace. But I'm always of the theory that, you know, these mantles are right out in the open. I think if I buy the Coleman globe that goes inside, it'll protect it somewhat. Otherwise, the first thing you're going to do, you have it burn it, and a moth is going to go in there and break them mantles. So I'm kind of hanging on to that, but someday I'll figure that out. Just a plain soup ladle for $1. It was in a box of junk for $1. Here again, trowel for $1. I've got a much better trowel. These aren't really good, but it doesn't weigh a lot, and I'm probably going to do some trapping this year. I have a better trowel, but this is a nice compact one. I have a long-handled one for trapping, but for $1. It's all right to have another trowel. Fluger Cub. I like these old fishing reels. You know, I know nobody uses them anymore, but this is really all I use. I don't care for that newer stuff. So I've got quite a few of this type of thing. Some of the fancier models, this is a pretty plain Jane, but they're really well built. I mean, they've got jeweled movements in them and stuff. They're well built. And $3. You know, I wasn't going to pass that up. But that's my kind of fishing reel. Those new ones with the magnetic anti-backlash and all that stuff, I don't really get into them. I've had them, didn't care for them. I like the ones that work like a winch. You know, they work. Now this, I've got several, or a couple of these that are cast iron. But here, this one turned up that is aluminum. It says non-ferrous. Well, that was a new one to me. For $3 I bought it. I had just never seen one that was made out of aluminum before. I don't know that there would be any advantage. It might heat up faster than cast. I don't know. But for $3 I wasn't going to mess around. I figured, well, it's something I hadn't seen before. Good enamel tea kettle that isn't all rusted up. Now I have, you know, my bigger tea kettle, but I tend to, when I'm canning, I use that in the canning. But I make tea a lot. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to get this video done, so I can put this stuff into service. So this will be the tea kettle I will use. Now, this next thing is one of the first things that I bought. And it was the best deal of the day. I think this was $3. But it's a great big cast iron pot. Or, you know, and it's a round bottom. It's got a piece of hay in it. And it's old. But it's got the 3 legs. And it's been used over a fire. So it works good, you know, over a fire. The only thing I can see on it, somebody has put a different handle on. This isn't the original handle, so I will probably go to the trouble of making a handle. You know, this is just a wire that somebody bent to fit, but I have some thin steel rod that I could make a better fitting handle. And I'll do that sometime. This would work perfectly fine, but this would work great to suspend it over a fire or sit it in the cold. Even could be used as a small Dutch oven if a person was to take and make a metal band that fit around here so that it would hold coals so you could dump the coals on top. I think that'd be very handy. But really nice kettle. And it's old. You know, I don't see a name on it anywhere or anything. I haven't really looked it over too close. I could just see that there was no flaws with it, but there might be a name under all that soot. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time cleaning up the outside because it'll be used over fire. But the inside, I got to scrub that out. It's a little caked up. The guy said the last thing he cooked in it was spaghetti, so there's probably remnants of spaghetti in there yet. But that had been a long time ago. But I like the round bottom idea, and I really like having the legs on it. So I think that was my deal of the day. That was, I think, $3. Now, because the one thing I asked the guy right away, because he also had one of the Lyman bullet casting furnaces, just the burner, not the pot. I don't know why, but he had that electric burner. Well, I just asked him to make sure that he hadn't used lead in this, because that would kind of be a mistake to try to cook in something that's lead been melted in, but no. And the burner, I was tempted, but it was only $3. And supposedly it worked, but I would never use it. I don't know that my generator could even power something that pulls that much current. So I'd end up having to try to resell it or something, so I just passed on it altogether. But for somebody, it would probably be a good deal. It would have been, but it was still there when I left. But that's the goods. So not a lot, but I was pleased with the stuff that I found. And like I say, this will be an experiment that I'll get back to sometime. I'll keep an eye on what kind of condition, because if they, I'm pretty sure they're gonna chew it up here, and eventually they're gonna bust it. But my theory is it'll bust right at the dividing line, because that's why generally I just avoid any of that combination. If you had all heartwood or all sapwood, because so many times, when you're splitting wood, you'll see it'll split right there. That's where it wants to split. Now, there might be a difference in that this is hickory, and I'm not burning hickory, but I got the feeling wood is kind of wood. And I just know there's usually a kind of a layer in between there where it wants to split. So that'll be an example of what'll happen. We'll let those hunters pound on wood for a while. And I think this is about a 3-pound head. So it's a fairly light head for splitting oak. That's why I can't get too big. But I'm thinking, like that big, and get a couple of knots in there to make them really work at it a little. Too big and they won't even try. But if I get it the right size, I think, their manhood will assert themselves, and I'll have to take a few whacks at her. We'll see. But that'll be a way of testing it. But like I say, myself, I wouldn't, it was funny, because there was a guy looking at handles, looking them over real carefully, picking through, and I was thinking, well, I avoided the area until he was done. He spent quite a little time, which is the thing to do. You really got to look handles over. But then after he left, then I went over and was trying to find a handle like this, that had what I would consider to be a flaw in the design. But, we'll find that out. I just thought I wouldn't buy it for one of my axes that I'm going to use. But for those deer hunters, that'll be just fine. It'll be a good test.